All right, hello. Sorry, I'll try not to talk too loud into the mic, but welcome back from lunch. I hope not everybody falls asleep during this. I know the afternoon slots are a little tough sometimes, so I'll try to keep this engaging, keep everybody awake. But I'm Gary Freas. I work at Mandiant. I'm a senior cyber threat intelligence analyst on the Advanced Intelligence Access Program, and I work in our DPRK-focused, North Korea-focused threat cell. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how APT43 is exploiting and leveraging some improper email configuration to conduct some of their phishing operations. Sorry, a little background on who we are. You see the logo here. That's our de facto coin, de facto sticker. In fact, I'm going to set some stickers up here. If you want to grab some after the presentation, feel free. If you want to leave some of your stickers, I will certainly accept them. They'll go on the laptop that's already flooded. But we're a team made of about half a dozen to a dozen folks that kind of cycle in and out, working on special projects focused on North Korean cyber operations. We got started about 6-7 years ago. A couple of the folks that are on the cell now, I worked with at a previous client, Michael Barnhart. Maybe you've heard of him. He's kind of our de facto cat herder, but he's also the face of our team. He's usually the one out on the speaking tours. I'm from the Rochester area originally, so I kind of stole this opportunity to come back home and do a little presentation. So, but what we were observing back then when we got started is we were seeing a lot of activity that we thought was related to DPRK. Ran it down and kind of showed, hey, here's our empirical evidence. Here's why we think this is North Korea. Who else cares about this? And we talked to FireEye, the predecessor, merged with Mandiant, and then Mandiant split back off. Now we're part of Google, but we talked to some of the FireEye folks and some of the other professionals out there, and it didn't seem like anybody really had a grasp on what North Korea cyber looked like. Didn't really seem to care too much either. I think it was kind of the prevailing thought at the time of like, they don't really have internet access, so nobody should care about it, right? But we were able to show that they were doing stuff from kind of all over the world, but also they're very crafty. So they're limited internet access. They're able to kind of leverage it with some partnerships and places that they go abroad. If you've ever heard of IT workers related to DPRK, they're deployed abroad working. Some of the malicious cyber actors as well, they're working outside the country. So they get crafty to try to find that internet access that they need to go after people. So we've been kind of preaching the gospel. We think we're making some headway. It seems like some of the partners that we've developed with seem to have a lot of telemetry that helps us. So this has been a labor of love for us, or hate, I don't know, whatever it is. Little background on kind of North Korea. If you don't know, it's a very totalitarian, oppressive regime. The main focus of the Kim dynasty is to stay in power. They use coercion, they use propaganda, they use indoctrination, violence, solitude and confinement and imprisonment and work camps and stuff to keep the population from uprising against the regime, stay in power. Their second national priority is to establish legitimacy on a geopolitical scale. And a big part of that is the nuclearization of their military. So we see them all the time talking to folks with these phishing operations, trying to gather information and intel on how the West views the regime, how it would respond to a nuclear weapon in North Korea, how it would respond to some of the activities that the Kim regime partakes. Violation of human rights and stuff like that is a big deal on the geopolitical scale. They've embraced cyber as a major part, a major tool in their arsenal to build out their military capabilities, steal proprietary information, steal research, enhance their abilities to nuclearize, but also get into space, right? They want an ICBM that can reach from Pyongyang to anywhere in the world. They view that as, and it's, it's no secret, right? Nuclearized countries are typically the ones that are taken a little more seriously, right? A nuke in the hands of this guy, we don't want that. But they think it's going to be something that will make them a player on the grand scale. So they want to be part of the international picture. So who is APT43? Well, this is one of our most recent graduated APTs. If you've ever heard the term Lazarus Group, that's kind of the catch-all term for North Korea cyber. We track several entities that fall under that bigger umbrella. Kimsuki is another term that's used for some of the activity of Kimsuki is what we track as APT43. Some of that additional activity we track as different actors or subsets of actors, but APT 43 aligns fairly closely with the actor that a lot of public entities track as Kim Sookie. We like to say or call them their kind of CTIC function, right? Because the operations that they conduct, they're going out, gathering intel, whether it's OSINT, phishing people to get information. They're constantly searching for intelligence that they can send back to the regime and inform their decision-making, inform how they'll proceed on things, gather how the West feels about Korean Peninsula affairs. Room 35 is a term that was used previously under the previous kind of way that DPRK was organized. A lot of their units were like room or lab or something along those lines. We assess this is pretty close to a one-to-one with what Room 35 used to be, and that was their OSINT, their CTIC basically back then. They're very prolific in social engineering. I say prolific because they're successful. I don't say prolific because they're really good at, really sophisticated, right? They're not very sophisticated, but they don't have to be because it works. They don't care about OPSEC too much, which is great for us, but also they're, brings them down on the sophistication scale. But they make up for that lack of sophistication with volume. We see millions and millions of phishing emails and campaigns, tons of infrastructure. We can't keep up, right, with how quick they turn and burn off of infrastructure and tactics. They're really agile, really flexible. We're constantly finding new infrastructure, new ways that they're doing things. And the DMARC stuff that I'm going to talk about in just a moment is just one of those new tactics that they've incorporated. Okay? So here's some examples of questions journalists might ask, right, about North Korea, some of the human rights stuff. Is the United States ever going to have a friendly or cordial relationship with Pyongyang? Are they ever going to come to terms on, sanctions and get North Korea some money to feed their people, but also get them to cede some of this stuff about human rights? Nuclear weapons against low Earth orbit satellites. How might the United States and its allies respond? Except these are false flag, right? So these are questions that they actually ask other journalists, academics, people in think tanks, NGOs, with spoofed personas, right? They pretend to be somebody and they send it out. And we've seen them really create a lot of spoof domains in some of the previous operations, but the DMARC stuff has really kind of changed the game for them. The kind of funny part about the low Earth orbit satellite piece was that was a question asked to a journalist about how they thought the U.S. would respond to the North Korean regime using a nuclear weapon against Starlink satellites. Contextually, is around the same time of the kickoff of like the latest Russian-Ukrainian conflict. And Elon at the time had talked about opening up Starlink for the Ukrainian populace to kind of maintain connection with the outside world, maintain communications. So we see that they keep their finger on the pulse, right? They understand what's going on in the world, and they're going to use those concepts, those conversations, those ideas in their operations and send it out. And it was, almost immediately, right? In the grand scheme, it was almost immediately after Elon made the announcement. So they moved pretty quickly. So here's an example of a phishing email we see, and I know it's kind of hard to see on the screen, but in the from line, I've obfuscated it to protect the innocent, but that's a legitimate person, their legitimate username at their legitimate domain, sent to another legitimate person at a legitimate domain, right? They're asking about presenting at a private workshop, attending one at the Pocantico Center in Terrytown. That's a real thing, real place, real event. The dates even align and all that, so they've done their homework, gone and done their research and got the information for it. They're sending this off to establish rapport. We see oftentimes this stuff will happen because they're trying to make friends, right? Establish that cordial relationship, and then follow on with things. We don't often see them employ malware, although they do have a couple of custom sets of malware and some commodity malware that they will lean on. But they're often just do and collect, right? They're just trying to gather intel. So this might be an opening email, and then maybe afterwards you'll get 5-6 questions about how the West feels about North Korea, things about nuclear proliferation, that sort of stuff. And on that note, here's another example of an email. Again, obfuscated to protect the innocent, but from line, legitimate person, legitimate username at a legitimate domain, okay? And this did hit the inbox of both of these hit the inbox of the sender. Okay, that's an important piece. So this is the follow-on email they might get with the questions. Can you share, an assessment of North Korea, some trending stuff? How would the U.S. Or what are North Korean policies, and what's the U.S. allied approach? Okay, so the question begs, like, how are they doing what they're doing then? As I said, it's a legitimate person at the legitimate domain, and it reaches the sender or the recipient's inbox, right? Well, a little background on why that shouldn't happen is SPF, DKIM, and DMARC were introduced to really combat this, right? So what that is SPF and DKIM address authentication, and DMARC is kind of how you handle it. If somebody tries to send something on behalf of your domain and they're not an authorized sender, what are you telling the people that are receiving it to do, right? So we're relying a little bit on trust, and that's kind of where the fault lies in this. But ultimately, it's to protect organizations and end users, right? We say all the time as security professionals, the weakest part of our security plan is the human factor, right? Whether it's a mistake an administrator makes or if it's the end user, right? They're not often savvy, or they may not know what to expect. But if we're failing them by not handling SPF and DKIM and DMARC properly, then we can't really blame them, right? When SPF and or DKIM fail, right? So if your DNS record doesn't match, you're not an authorized sender, it gets marked as fail for either SPF or DKIM. Then DMARC gets failed as total, right? And then there's a DMARC text property that will tell a recipient what to do, right? How do you handle this email if it's failed? There's really three options. P equals reject, that's the good one, right? Just get rid of it. They're not allowed to send on my behalf, just get rid of it, right? P equals quarantine. Mark it as junk, mark it as spam, tell your end user that it might be bad, right? Or send it to your email appliance, right? Send it to your deeper inspection if you've got something that sits behind the border, okay? You may end up discarding it with that extra analysis, or the user might just say, it's junk, I'm getting rid of it, right? That's the optimal outcome, but it still might not, right? If it does hit their junk folder. How many users do you think clicking stuff in junk, right? They might still. And then the bad one is P equals none. And this is where the problem lies. P equals none is basically like, don't do anything with it, right? I don't know why anybody would ever want to, other than testing early, and maybe it's a situation where they're testing to get things sent and then they forget to come back. Again, that human factor, right? But all of these organizations that we've seen these spoofed emails get through have this P equals none set in their email configuration, okay? So basically what's happening is it's getting to a user's inbox, because if you're an organization with 100,000 users and 100 million people that you interact with, do you have the bandwidth to analyze everyone and make a different decision based on the header information? Maybe, right? Maybe, but not all, right? If you're a small organization that doesn't have the resources for that sort of thing, you're probably not going to do that extra analysis either, okay? So this is an example of how are they figuring out who's got this setting? Because they're not just guessing and getting it right. They can go to, this is MX Toolbox, it's not the only one, but they can go here and they can see there's no DMARC policy set. Okay, so whoever this organization was, right, I can just go in here, I want to target XYZ organization, and I'm going to use ABC organization to spoof and then target them. I come here, I look at ABC organization, I see that they've got no policy set. I now can spoof them and optimally or reasonably expect that it's going to hit the user's inbox, and then I can establish that rapport, I can deliver malicious content, and I look exactly like the person who sent it, right? What do we always tell users? Make sure you check that from line. Make sure you know who it's from, right? Legitimate person, legitimate username, legitimate domain, because they're able to spoof it based on this misconfiguration, okay? Looking a little deeper into the email headers, so we see that they're using a proxy email sender, so you can see the initial pass up there with SPF, but then you see down below the DMARC fail. That's because it then went and checked the organization that they spoofed, right, after it went through the proxy sender, and it said, you're not authorized to send on behalf of this domain, and it fails. But as you can see in the parentheses there, P equals none, right? So recipient was told to do nothing with it, likely did nothing with it, and it ended up in their inbox, okay? So what can we do about this, right? Well, SPF, DMARC, and DKIM, it's a fairly easy part of the configuration, but it's also fairly easy to overlook. As I mentioned, a lot of admins that we've had conversations with, they've said like, we were testing to make sure that our emails were getting where we want them to get to, that we could send through this. Or we've also talked to them where they have mailers that they've worked with that have said like, set your DMARC to P equals none so that I can send on your behalf, right? Instead of going through and marking them as an authorized sender in SPF, right? And making sure that it passes properly and that they're an authorized sender, just set it to P equals none because it's easier, right? So let's stop that to begin with. If you work at one of those mailer companies, right? We'll forgive you, but let's stop doing that. But we need to have the conversations, right? With a smaller shop, right? If you have friends that work at a smaller shop that they don't have the personnel and they're overworked, right? How many people are overworked and under-resourced? Let's have that conversation with them because this is a pretty easy thing to fix, right? It's basically a toggle switch if you've got a application that you manage your mail exchanger from. So let's have the conversation, make sure people understand this, because in addition to the ones that have been reported to us with DPRK doing it, I went and did a little research in VirusTotal and found dozens, just on a very cursory search, dozens of organizations that have had either automated uploads from like antivirus or their mail system is set to analyze them and leverage the tools, but also others that were manually uploaded. And it's not just think tanks, NGOs, those sorts of organizations that might not care as much about security. The first one I found was a multinational finance corporation. So it's not just the little guy or the guy who's secondary concern is security. So have those conversations, spread the word. Very easy thing to fix, very easy tactic to undercut, and we're seeing it at the nation state level. This may be more popular as well. This isn't something we can just go check for either, right? Because how many domains are out there? Can we just run MX Toolbox against them all? These have been reported to us. We don't know how many more people are doing it and getting away with it. So that's really it for me. I want to thank Kathy and the rest of the B-Sides folks for letting me present. This is actually my first presentation at a conference, so appreciate you all sitting in as well. But I'll open the floor. Any questions? Yeah. So for us, right, we were able to say like, this is North Korea. You don't want this, right? That was kind of our crowbar that we were able to go at them with, right? But in a general sense, it's not always going to be North Korea. It might be some criminal operator that's trying to make money, et cetera. Just talk to them about things like loss of reputation, impact to users, right? Because while these folks are just going out and trying to gather intel, who knows what other people are trying to do? Are they delivering malware? Are they delivering ransomware and stuff like that? Are they harvesting creds, right? They may be delivering links to log into places and you trust them. Then you go and you put your creds in. And then that all comes back on you because when there's an incident and we find out patient 0 is an email that came from your organization and you didn't have this properly configured, well, now everybody knows you were the cause of it, right? So things like that. I think the reputation piece was big. Like I said, for us, it was easy to say, this is a nation-state actor of a pretty bad nation, right? So, but yeah, that loss of reputation is a big piece.
If emailer or handler is exploited and leveraged, what are some possible ways to support against that? Because the domain is going to look legitimate.
Yeah, that's tough, right? I mean, you're basically going to have to find that malicious content that is being sent, right? If the mail service itself is exploited, that's a little tougher. If it's a setting like this that's easy to identify, sure, but that's more of like an IR type deal, and you're going to find that malicious content that's coming in via email, right? We've seen it, right? SendMail has been a big one that's been abused a lot. APT 29 loves email services because they can hit a lot of people. Good question.
As far as setting, protections for permitted senders and everything, I know like SPF doesn't allow more than 10 DNS lookups per query, and like text records are limited to 255 characters. So if you have an organization that has, say, a couple dozen domains that are all authorized to send
That's a good question. I'm not really sure because that could be kind of a blind spot.
So you can flatten it, which is a pain about the admin, or you can do subdomains.
There's also services like little proxy or SPF for you.
Yeah, proxies help, but again, if you're relying on a third party, right? I understand your question. I think that's just kind of a blind spot when it comes to.
You could really leverage DKIM at that point, right? It means having a fight with your vendor, right? Because you have to get the domain alignment right. But DKIM is going to be the fallback for SPF. If you're going to hit a limit, you just got to make a change to what's any modifier.
Yeah. Thanks. Any others?
DNS, out of all the major players and vendors out there for cloud-hosted DNS, what would you recommend? Like Azure, Cloudflare, Google, AWS?
Google. I work for Google. I honestly, I'm not the guy to answer that question necessarily. I'm not an architect when it comes to that, so I default answer is Google. Any others? All right. Well, thank you all. Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
You mentioned earlier about North Korea kind of leveraging some certain malware. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more for what they're kind of having in their toolbox?
I mean, from the custom side, there's a wide array of things, but from the commodity side, you see things like Cobalt Strike often when they're on-prem. We have seen them leverage Ryuk in the past as well for ransomware, for RevGen. One thing that I didn't necessarily go deeply into is like every cyber actor that falls under the DPRK umbrella has either a primary or a secondary priority to make money, right? So we see them work with ransomware actors as well, using ransomware. A lot of times what we've seen is like there's a lot of cred harvesters that they like to use, and they can come back and leverage account access and stuff like that. Yeah, I know they get a bad name because, like I said, everybody kind of just thinks like it's the Hermit Kingdom. They don't have internet access, they don't have any of that, but they're really sharp. They're really flexible. A couple of their actors, APT38, which is now evolved into like Crypto Core and Apple Juice, Trader, sorry, if you've heard those terms, but really sophisticated, really good custom malware development. And Dario, they're the ones focused on building the nuke, really sophisticated as well, really good custom malware that they put together as well.
With the introduction of LLMs and generative AI, have you seen any reason for phishing?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question, right? So those two emails that we had up, we suspect they used generative AI. So we saw maybe 24 months ago, 18 to 24 months ago, we saw a drastic change in APT43's sophistication with regards to their emails. And we had some telemetry that they're using things like, generative AI, chat bots, those sorts of things. They're using them, and they are, write me an email that says this from this person, and it spits them out. So they've got it in their toolbox. I know other threat actors from other nation states as well, but we've seen them directly using generative AI and chat bots to put phishing emails together. And it's a challenge then, right? Because a lot of our training for users is like spot the needle in the haystack, the incorrect use of the word the or something along those that doesn't fit with native language. Things like ChatGPT can write in dialects across different regions within just the United States, right? It doesn't have to be English versus Spanish versus Chinese. It's literally like, write me an email like I'm from Iowa, and it'll use dialect that's native to like those regions and stuff. So it's very much a challenge.
So is there a time for us to look towards more content detections?
Heuristic analysis is huge right now. With content, I know it's a challenge in terms of evaluating like the body of an email or something along those lines, but that heuristic analysis is a huge deal. And I know like the integration of AI is big right now with detections, which should help. But yeah, we can't rely on static signatures and stuff anymore. That's just kind of what it's gotten to. All right. Well, thank you all.
we would like to thank you
Oh, thank
for
you.
joining us. And I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to do your intro. You got
That's all right.
started,
That's
you know,
all right.
right on time. So thank you again.
Thank you. Like I said, there's some stickers up here if you guys want to, if you want a sticker.